mouth taping?
I'm going to give this one a 2. There is not that much evidence for this.
And how about melatonin supplements?
I'm going to say 7 as well. They can be helpful for some, not for the average person who doesn't necessarily have issues with their sleep. We know that sleep need does change depending on what phase of life we're in.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Her Health podcast. In our previous episode, we were talking about libido, communication, and confidence. We are now staying in the bedroom, but we are talking about something totally different, which is sleep. We are joined by Dr. Tracy Flowers, who is very well versed in sleep. She is a GP, functional medicine practitioner, and has a special interest in women's health. Tracy comes with a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and we're really looking forward to this conversation. So, Tracy, we're going to start with a rapid fire just to break the ice and debunk some myths. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, can you rate whatever I throw at you? Let's start with mouth taping.
I'm going to give this one a 2. There is not that much evidence for this, and there's also some risk. If someone has sleep apnea or nasal obstruction, it might actually be harmful.
Weighted blankets.
7, it can be helpful for some individuals, especially if there is an anxiety-related sleep issue.
A freezing cold room.
I'm going to give that an 8 or a 9. There is a lot of evidence to support that a cold room can help with the quality and depth of your sleep.
Sleep tracking devices or wearables.
I'll say a 5, and it's tricky because you can get a lot out of them. They can highlight potential issues, you can track patterns, but there is limited accuracy and they're not necessarily diagnostic. And for some people, it can cause orthosomnia, where you become obsessed with perfecting your sleep.
It's also interesting. I have an Apple Watch and I have a Ring, and they show wildly different sleep metrics.
Exactly.
And, then you think, what do you believe? And is it actually even true?
Exactly.
Okay, the other one, blue light blocking glasses.
I'll say 7. There is some evidence for this because when we are exposed to blue light at night, that can suppress melatonin production and impact the quality of our sleep. But they're not necessarily for everyone. So if someone has insomnia or is a shift worker, that's where the majority of the evidence lies for blue light blocking glasses.
So would you only wear them at night or the whole day?
In the evening
Okay.
would be when you'd use them, yeah.
You mentioned melatonin. How about melatonin supplements?
I'm going to say 7 as well. They can be helpful for some, not for the average person who doesn't necessarily have issues with their sleep, but melatonin can help in cases like jet lag, in the elderly, and certain sleep disorders as well.
So we all know that sleep is fundamental to your health for so many reasons. Your mood, anxiety, energy levels, hormones, there's a ripple effect. So can you just briefly, because this is a huge topic, explain why sleep is so fundamental to your health?
Yeah. So we're spending about a third of our lives either sleeping or trying to sleep. And that's a significant proportion of our lives, right? And it seems like this passive state, but it's highly active, and there are a lot of processes that are going on in our bodies. So we are physically repairing, we are emotionally and psychologically repairing, our brain is rewiring, we're laying down memory, we're learning when we're sleeping. So there's a lot of important activity that's happening. And, I'll talk to patients about the pillars of health: exercise, nutrition, stress management, connection. But sleep is kind of the foundation for all of those things. I'm sure if you've had a bad night of sleep, you'll know that the next day your nutrition is probably a little bit off. You are gravitating towards foods that you maybe wouldn't normally. You're not able to push it as hard in terms of your exercise. So there's a lot of ripple effects, as you mentioned, when it comes to sleep. And I think it's also this, we know that sleep is important, but it's one of these areas that we know as a society we're not really focusing on it that much. There was a survey done that completed at the midway through this year, and they were looking globally at people's sleep and what people perceive their sleep to be like. And they found that about a third of people struggled with their sleep, and that had consequences for their work and for their relationships. And they labeled it a sleep crisis because we are struggling with our sleep, and yet we know it is so foundational for all those various reasons.
Yeah, you see it everywhere. They're now talking about sleep being a luxury, which is quite sad because it should be a necessity or a staple, not necessarily luxury. But I guess in this day and age, The normal things are becoming less normal. So ironically, you said you had a very bad night's sleep last night. Can you maybe give us an overview of how you dealt with that during the night?
Yeah, it is highly ironic that I didn't have a great night of sleep. And I think the first thing to highlight is that, disordered sleep happens to everyone from time to time, and there are various triggers that can cause it. And so it's something that's just part of life. And I think it is being able to then adapt and manage that as it kind of comes up. And obviously, just picking up if this is something that's happening really often and you're entering the territory of a sleep disorder versus just disordered sleep, right?
What would be the differentiation or distinguishing factor?
Sure. So disordered sleep is where you might just have a night that is an off night. It's not something that's happening regularly or often, and it's not having a significant impact on your daytime functioning continuously. Versus a sleeping disorder, of which there are many, but most people will know about insomnia, which is happening more than 3 nights a week, and it's usually chronic, so longer than 3 months. The big thing is that it's then impacting your daytime functioning. So there are daytime symptoms that are happening. In terms of what I then did now with my bad nights of sleep, I think the first thing I was trying to tell myself when I was lying in bed is, it's okay. I'm going to get some sleep eventually, and trying to do some relaxation practices, some breathwork techniques, trying to do some prayer and meditation to actually get to sleep. And then what was interesting was that my body naturally woke up before my alarm, which is usually about 5:15. And I could have decided I'm going to try get a little bit more sleep, but our body really likes consistency and regularity. So I decided I'm going to stick to my normal routine here. I'm going to get up, have my breakfast, etc. And again, had a decision, do I now go exercise? Do I not? But I decided I'm going to go ahead and exercise because this is part of my normal routine. And these are things that also support my brain health, right? If I'm hoping to then come and have a conversation around, sleep, where I'd hopefully be able to have my brain working well, those things are then going to support that. So
funny you mentioned exercise, because I actually read that doing 10 minutes of high intensity exercise is the best thing you can do after a poor night's sleep or when you've got jet lag. And it probably ties into, maybe endorphins, your circadian rhythm, if that's what you generally do in the morning. So maybe you can delve a little more into that with a particular focus on the circadian rhythm and how important that is.
So our circadian rhythm is this fascinating cycle, again, coming back to regularity, that our body follows. We have this 24-hour rhythm that our body naturally follows. And there are things that we can do that are behavioral that can support that circadian rhythm and that regularity. So like I said, waking up at the same time every day really supports and entrains that circadian rhythm. Getting light in the morning, ideally natural outdoor light, again, entrains that circadian rhythm. It helps with the cortisol awakening response. And then when we eat and when we exercise can also help with entraining that rhythm too. So if that is something that you'd ordinarily do, would be to exercise in the morning and eat in the morning, that is something that your body then is kind of, it's supporting your body in maintaining that rhythm and having a nice normal spike in cortisol in the morning. When it comes to exercise, I think the one thing that is worth mentioning is that exercising intensely before bedtime can have a negative consequence on your sleep, right? Because you do have all that sympathetic activation. You've got adrenaline and noradrenaline and the release of all the other hormones and neurotransmitters as a result of exercise that can be detrimental. So having it in the morning is really nice if you're wanting to get that kind of alertness post-exercise.
There was another thing that I heard that, in terms of seeing light in the morning. So that's light from the sunlight, not light from your phone.
Yeah.
And they say that you should see that light without sunglasses on. And it's 5 minutes if it's sunny, 10 minutes if it's cloudy, and 20 minutes if it's raining, which I thought was quite a good gauge. Not that I would put glasses on after 20 minutes if it was raining, but anyway. So I think, that definitely helps in regulating that circadian rhythm. Then just talking about like sleep stages.
Mm.
So my ring and watch spit out that there's deep sleep, there's light sleeps, there's REM sleep, and then we all know that there's non-REM sleep. So maybe you can just differentiate those. In particular, like the deep sleep and the REM sleep.
Mm. So you've mentioned all of them. There are two different phases of sleep. So we have non-REM sleep and REM, REM standing for rapid eye movement sleep. And non-REM is then divided into light and deep. And we move through these stages sequentially, and that forms a sleep cycle. And a sleep cycle lasts anywhere between 60 to 90 minutes. And we should ideally get about 4 to 6 of those per night, depending on how long we sleep for. Light sleep is actually where we spend the majority of our night. So about 50 to 60% is spent in that light sleep. And, each of these stages and phases is determined by the brainwave activity that's happening. So that's obviously been, measured and viewed in a lab. But that light sleep is really important for memory consolidation. So we do need it. And then we move into deep sleep, which is slow wave sleep. And we spend about 15 to 25% of our night there. And this stage of sleep is really important for our physical recovery. So it's normally happening in the first half of the night. And that's also, interestingly, when our body is releasing growth hormone. So again, into the kind of physical repair and restoration. It's also really important for our immune function. So there is, there's a lot of value that we get out of our deep sleep. And then we should move into REM sleep, which I think is one of the most fascinating phases of sleep, right? Our brains are highly active in this phase of sleep. And this is when we're generally dreaming. Our brains like to prioritize this stage of sleep as well. So if we get a really short night of sleep, and I'm sure most people would have experienced this, you might have all these vivid dreams and wake up feeling a little bit disoriented and not so refreshed because your body has prioritized this REM sleep. And this phase of sleep is really important for our emotional and psychological health. It's also important for our creativity and learning. So each stage and phase has its kind of unique benefits.
So you got great REM sleep last night.
Some wild dreams, yeah.
Okay, so I look at my kids, and my daughter, and mums will kill me for this, but she'll sleep from 7:30 till 8, which
Amazing.
is very long, and she's
Yeah.
age 3. My boys sleep for about 10 hours. I probably get 7 or 8 hours a night, which I'm quite proud of. So what changes as you age? Is there like a generic amount of sleep through the ages, or is it very individual?
So we know that sleep need does change a little bit, depending on what phase of life we're in. Kids do need more sleep. So children need generally between 9 to 12 hours of sleep, and teenagers need about 8 to 10, adults somewhere between 7 to 9. So children and teenagers do need more. And if we think about the stages and phases of sleep that we've just mentioned, they are learning, they are growing, they are laying down new memory, they're learning all these new skills. So it makes sense that they need a bit more sleep. Adults, as I said, 7 to 9 hours. So well done for getting that. And then as we get older, often people will say that older people sleep less and need less sleep. But they don't need less sleep. They still need more than 7 hours. But generally, sleep quality deteriorates. So somewhere from our 50s to 60s, we see patterns emerge where sleep becomes a little bit lighter, it becomes a bit more fragmented. And so getting longer sleep might be a little bit more difficult.
Why? Why does your sleep deteriorate as you hit your 50s and 60s?
So there are some declines in production of melatonin, especially as you get older.
What is the optimal sleep stack, if you had to give one?
So I think before we talk about stack, we have to talk about habits and routines because we cannot out-supplement bad habits, right? And when we look at interventions for sleep disorders, the first line management is actually something called CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And that's as effective as pharmaceutical medications. And obviously comes without the side effects and the risks. So I think we have to be focusing on habits before we look at adding in anything else if we're concerned about our sleep and our sleep quality. So here, I think a lot of people are aware of these things, which is great because there are more conversations happening around them. But I like to think about them in terms of the 4 S's. The first one being sight and screens, substances, sameness, and stress management. So sight and screens, I think, again, most people are aware that viewing blue light, especially at night, then suppresses melatonin production and can impact the quality of their sleep. It's also about the content of what you're viewing because our phones are designed to grab and maintain a hold on our attention.
Does a phone and a TV have the same effect?
They do have a similar effect, but again, then it's content related too. A TV is often further away, so you're getting less blue light directly into your eyes. And phones generally, social media is a lot more attention grabbing, so the content is often a lot more stimulating. So some people will say that they fall asleep to the TV, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But I think for the majority of people using their phones and social media at night, that does have a negative impact on sleep quality. And then, of course, the next being substances. I'm not talking about illicit drugs, but substances that everyone uses, like caffeine and alcohol. Caffeine, you'll have those people that will say they can have a coffee right before they go to bed and they don't have an issue at all. Sensitivity to caffeine is largely driven by genetics. So some people really aren't that sensitive. But for the majority of people, caffeine having a half-life of kind of 5 to 6 hours means that it's in your system for a long time. And we should ideally be avoiding it sort of 10 hours before bedtime, 8 to 10 hours, somewhere there. And then with alcohol, again, lots of people feel like it has this wonderful sedative effect, and so they sleep well with alcohol. But what we know is that it decreases REM sleep and it fragments your sleep. So you're waking up a lot more, even if you're not aware of it. So it definitely does have an impact there. The next being sameness, so that regularity that we've spoken about and having some kind of routine. Interestingly, the temperature of a really chilly room is also a cue for our body. So it helps with that regularity. It lets your body know that it's time to cool down your body temperature. Our body temp should drop by about 0.5 to 1 degree before we go to sleep. And that cool room allows that kind of cue to happen so that we can have a good night's sleep.
So one thing I struggle with the cool room is I'll go to sleep and it's fine, and then I'll actually wake up cold. Why would that happen, and what can I do about that?
So some people will say that you need your core temperature to be cool. You can still have your extremities warmed with socks and have a nice duvet on, but we're wanting to make it so that it's not freezing cold, that it's then going to wake you up. The ideal is between 16 and 19 degrees. So,
and that's cold. I'm talking
cold.
20 degrees and I'm cold.
Yeah, it is chilly. So I think having things that you can then layer as well is important.
Okay.
So when a room is too warm, what we see is it increases the time to sleep onset, and it can also cause awakenings at night and make deep sleep, or reduces deep sleep. So it makes sleep lighter overall. So we do want it to be cold, but not to the point that you're then freezing and that then is waking you up. So I think having things to layer would probably be ideal so that you're somewhere in between. I think with all of these things, there is a bit of individual nuance. It's tricky to make blanket statements around these things. But
Statements, mind the pun there. Okay, so you've mentioned the 4 S's, but something you haven't mentioned is your partner, the person in the bed with you.
Yes.
So I feel like that is a big proponent to good sleep or bad sleep. So, funny enough, when I was younger, I slept best on my own, but now I sleep better when my husband's next to me. But also, and this is an insight into my life, my husband and I are very European Scandi in that we have separate duvets.
Yeah.
And this is something my parents did, my parents' did, so maybe it's the Dutch there. But, what are your ideas on this? And I mean, some people even have separate beds or separate bedrooms.
Yeah.
So is there any science behind sharing a room or a bed or a duvet?
I'm with you on this, to be honest. I think there's something psychologically comforting of having someone there in the room with you, right? But especially for someone that sleeps a little bit light, those disturbances can then wake you up. And if you then struggle to fall back asleep, it impacts the quality of your sleep. Or if you have a partner that snores, or, something else that disrupts your sleep. So my husband and I also have 2 separate beds pushed together. So it's a king size, but separate beds and separate duvets as well. And it's been a game changer, because then any movement or, tug of the duvet isn't going to wake the other up. So I'm a big fan of that. And I think it can be useful. If a couple is, they're really deep sleepers and neither of them kind of, are disrupted by noises or movement, maybe they don't need that. But I think for the average couple, usually one person is a lighter sleeper and gets disrupted. So I think it's a really practical thing to do.
How do you feel about earplugs?
So earplugs and white noise can be useful. It's very much down to individual preference. The literature does show that for light sleepers or where there is environmental noise, they can be helpful, but it's again not for everyone. But if someone finds that they benefit, there are things that are almost harmless, right? So I think they can be of benefit for some people.
And then when we are talking about certain sleep aids, so obviously there's melatonin, which is a scripted product, probably not something you want to be taking every night. I don't know, the jury's out. But then you have other natural ingredients that can assist with sleep. Do you have any favorites that you can outline?
Yeah. So I think the thing for me, when it comes to looking at nutrients and sleep, the first thing I would be looking at would be deficiencies. So ideally testing, and then supplementing based on those levels. But things like our iron levels, our vitamin D, B6, zinc, and magnesium all have a significant impact on our sleep. So I would start with nutrient deficiencies and get some data around it. Don't blindly go in there.
So how would these nutrient deficiencies have an impact on your sleep?
A lot of them are involved in GABA signaling, and GABA is one of the inhibitory neurotransmitters that's involved in sleep. Iron is an interesting one. It's involved in so many different processes, but there are certain sleep disorders like restless leg syndrome, for example, which can actually be caused by iron deficiency as well. You can have similar symptoms to that. So, these nutrients are things that are used in ubiquitous processes in our bodies, but they are involved in sleep as an integral function of the processes in the body.
So I have my favorites, but I'd love to hear what your favorites
Yeah,
are.
sorry, I haven't got to my favorites yet. So the ones that I most often use in patients, the first one would be magnesium. There are many different forms of magnesium, and all of them are good for sleep. And so I'll often be tailoring which magnesium I'm choosing based on other symptoms that someone might have. But the one that I find really useful for sleep in particular is magnesium L-Threonate, because it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it has a beautifully calming effect. It also helps with GABA signaling. So it's a really nice one to use. And very, I don't ever find that it has side effects or kind of negative consequences. So it's a really lovely product to use. And then the next is L-theanine. And L-theanine is an amino acid, and it has a lovely calming effect as well. The nice thing about it is that it's not sedating. So I'll actually sometimes use L-theanine in patients in daytime as well, if they need kind of calm focus. But it has, because of that calming effect, it's really nice for kind of setting the runway up for sleep. And then the last one would be something like Apigenin, which is a flavonoid found in chamomile, which again has a calming effect. So I think the kind of string between all of these things is the calming effect, which again is a reason that a lot of people might experience disruptions in their sleep, because either they are kind of stressed and worried or anxious. If there is a real underlying issue with sleep and a sleep disorder like we've spoken about, and possibly a mental health condition like anxiety or depression, certainly that needs to be addressed and looked at. But these are the kinds of things that I'd be looking at to support someone's sleep who's maybe having an odd night here or there that is not so great.
Yeah, I think sleep anxiety is a big thing. You get into bed and you're like, oh, I didn't sleep last night, or I've got a podcast tomorrow, I need to fall asleep.
Exactly.
And things like L-theanine, GABA, lactium, which is in our Bettersleep, all help with that, calming the nervous system and bringing on that onset of sleep. But I'm with you on the L-threonate and the Apigenin. So this is my sleep stack: the Bettersleep, the L-threonate, and the Apigenin. And I do wear these trackers and I do look at them, and no, I'm not obsessed, but I do look at it in the morning. It's more of a game for me, but I feel like since I've started that sleep stack, my deep sleep, so my REM has always been okay, but it was my deep sleep that never really got up to where it should be. And if I'm mistaken, your REM should be between 20 and 25.
Yes. Yeah.
Your deep sleep between 15 and 20.
That's right.
And then the rest is light sleep.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm hitting my scores now.
Fantastic. Yeah. Love it.
Okay, is there anything that you think, if there's one top tip you can give people that are struggling with their sleep, what would it be?
I think it comes down to that regularity, the things that I spoke about that I did after my one night of bad sleep. And with that, I think we know a lot of these different kind of things to do, but a bedtime routine is a really beautiful way to incorporate a lot of things and give our body those cues. So setting aside that hour before bed, listeners wanted to do one thing tonight for their sleep. So take that hour before bedtime, not schedule anything else in that hour. Ideally in that time, put your phone away, maybe go have a nice warm bath or shower, definitely not a cold plunge, and then do something that you enjoy that's calming, whether that be meditation or breath work, read a book, prayer, journal, do things that can allow your body to calm. We live in a kind of age of sympathetic activation, right? We're all stressed and go, go, go. So allowing your body that space to do something that's calming and relaxing is always going to be beneficial.
So say you have a bad night's sleep. Can you catch up on that? There's this sleep debt that builds up, particularly if you have small children. Can you catch up on that? Or is it better just to stick to this routine?
Yeah. So to an extent, we all are catching up on sleep debt in some way because we've had a whole day, right? And then we're kind of catching up on the debt that's built up during the day and the sleep pressure that's built up. But we can't bank our sleep. We can't go and have 12 hours one night and then 3 hours the next and expect that to average out, right? We want to be having as much consistent good sleep as possible. So not really. And again, it comes down to that consistency. We want to be trying to have roughly our 7 to 9 hours every night. I will say for those certain life stages and phases like postpartum, when you have a newborn who you're at the mercy of, right? The thing in that time is really to be focusing as much as you can on the quality of your sleep over the quantity. Ideally, we want both quality and quantity, but in a season of life like that, focus on the quality. And if you can, try get a block of sleep, get your partner to help so that you're getting 3 or 4 hours in a chunk at a time is important. And there are other stages of life like perimenopause as well, right? Where our sleep is disrupted. And we can then look at other adjuncts to try and manage those underlying issues and causes. But again, focusing on the quality where we can and using the right things to address the underlying issue are important.
So how do you feel about a nap or a power nap? Because I'm not a believer in napping. I can't nap in the day. I'd rather go to bed earlier, which then is getting out of routine. So I don't know. But what is your perspective on that?
Right. So napping is controversial. And you'll find some people will swear by something like a power nap. That generally means that individual has some degree of sleep restriction, because we shouldn't be relying on naps or even stimulants like caffeine to be able to kind of get through our day and function well. I have stolen this from Professor Dale Ray, who speaks about the things that you can get a license for napping. And I really love that way of thinking about it, because it says that not everyone should be napping, right? So if you are an athlete, so you have really high sleep needs, again, back to the physical restoration. If you are a parent of a young child and your sleep is all over the place, if you're a shift worker, if you are sick, or if you have some kind of acute sleep debt for whatever reason, that you could then have a nap. I think I've earned a nap this afternoon from my nights of bad sleep. So those are the kinds of things that you could then say a nap would be okay. The thing with napping, again, as you said, it takes you out of your regular routine. It lifts some of the sleep pressure off. It uses up some of that adenosine reserve that's built in the day. So you're not going to be able to get to bed at the same time that night necessarily. And And with napping, it's really not something that you want to be making a regular habit of, because again, then we're questioning what's happening with your nighttime sleep.
I like that. License to nap.
Yes.
It's great. So another question we've actually had from our community, can a night owl become an early bird and vice versa?
Okay. So what you're referring to are individuals' different chronotypes, right? So our chronotype is when in a 24-hour period our circadian rhythm is going to sit. So you'll have those people that are really morning type people, you'll have evening type people, and then you'll have the neutral people in between who are a little bit flexible. And the majority of people actually sit in that neutral type. The thing with our chronotypes, they are largely genetically determined, right? But they can, to an extent, be conditioned by the things that we've mentioned, the external behavioral things like light exposure, timing of exercise and eating. But not to make giant shifts and changes. So, I mean, our world, at least in South Africa, we're quite morning oriented, right? And so for an evening type person, that might be quite difficult, especially as it comes to work and getting up early and being productive in the morning. So to an extent, an individual that's an evening type can condition themselves by using those external cues, but they're not going to become someone that is going to feel good and function well waking up at 5 and going to bed at 9 if they would ordinarily be, shifted a lot later. I think ideally we want to be working with our chronotype as much as possible.
If it's genetic, then Mediterranean people are probably all night owls, because it's wild how they wake up at 10 and go to bed at midnight.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Most South Africans are up and at it at 7.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I've learned a lot. This has been a brilliant conversation. Thank you. I hope our community has learned something about sleep. If not, please ask us some questions and we'd be happy to ask Tracy or other experts and get back to you. The purpose of the Her Health podcast is really to tap into the unbelievable minds of health specialists in the female industry and really share these insights and knowledge with you. So thank you for joining us. As a special thank you, please use the Her Health code to get 20% off your order on Phytoceutics.com. Remember to follow us on socials, tap into our broadcast channels so you can get behind the scenes. And remember, look after yourself, sleep well, and be a force of nature.